Hi guys, I hope you're doing great today. Well, this is our lecture number 7 of our DevOps Roadmap 2024 and it's about the Linux file system. In the earlier lectures, we learned how can we install a Linux VM. We installed the Ubuntu distribution using the VMware player, and after that we used PuTTY to connect with our VM. Now it's time that we should learn about the Linux architecture, Linux file system. What is a Linux file system? You might have seen in the post like the directories of Linux operating system like root, home, var, lib. What are those directories? What is the directory structure of a Linux operating system? And we are going to discuss it in this lecture. So let's get started. So guys, this is really important to understand that in Linux, the Linux file system is usually presented by this forward slash. This forward slash is actually the Linux file system in a Linux operating system. For instance, I want to move towards the home directory or the root directory or the var directory. I will use this forward slash like home, var, root, etc, etc. And this would be like forward slash home, forward slash var, forward slash root. So what is this forward slash? This is actually the Linux file system. It represents the Linux file system. So a Linux file system is actually a structured collection of files on a disk drive or a partition. And what is a partition? A partition is a segment of memory and contains some specific data. The purpose of Linux file system is to organize the data so we can easily access the data within no time. So the Linux file system can contains the following section, in which I have already told you the root directory. This is actually the main part of the Linux file system. And using this root directory, we can navigate to the other directories in a Linux file system. Like I have shared the example of home, var and root. You can see that this forward slash would be there if we want to navigate to any other directory. But don't worry, we will do it practically on our Linux VM. So what are the three main sections of a file system? The three sections of file system. Number one, the root directory, which is represented by this forward slash. Data storage format like ext3, ext4. These are the data storage formats. And a partition, which is a logical volume of your operating system like dev, sda, etc. So the Linux file system helps us to arrange the data and to arrange the storage for us. Linux file system is actually built-in layer of the operating system. The Linux file system actually manages the file names, file sizes, the creation date of the files and much more. Now let's discuss the three sections of our file system one by one in detail. You don't have to confuse with the directories and folders. In Windows we call them folders and in Linux we call them directories. So directories are just the folders in Linux and these directories help us to store the data. So in order to understand the directory structure, you must know about this forward slash. It is actually the main point from where you navigate to the other directories on a Linux operating system. Let me simplify it a little bit more. So this is my main root directory. The directory structure of Linux is well documented and is defined in the Linux File System Hierarchy Standard, FHS. The file system hierarchy standard defines the sequence of the directories in a Linux operating system. So this forward slash is actually the root file system and it is the top level file system directory. It must include every file that is required to boot a Linux system. So without this root directory, there is no operating system. So the other directories can be home, etc, etc, boot, var, bin, temp, proc, mount, lib, media, and a couple of more. So root is the main directory, and you can see that the other directories lie beneath this main directory. So you can see that I have put this forward slash before directory. It means that to move towards, like I want to go to the temp directory or bin, I have to use the main root directory. I have to use the main path, this forward slash. This is the root directory, and I want to go to the bin. I have to move, I have to go from the root point. So it means that this bin directory comes under the root directory. Bin, var, boot, proc, mount, these all directories come under the umbrella of the main root directory. I hope you understand it now. So that's the importance of this main directory, root directory. You have to use this to navigate to other directories and folders. Now there can be subdirectories in a Linux file system. In order to move to other subdirectories, you have to use the main directory, the root directory, the subdirectory, and then, for instance, I want to go to the lib directory, lib, var log. These are common, these are so common directories in a Linux file system. So what would be the path? The main root directory, then var, which is the subdirectory of the root directory, and then the log directory. So that would be the complete path to enter into the log directory. This log directory contains the logs of the system and other tools that we install, like Apache, secure logs, server logs. Similarly, when we install Nginx, it is installed in the etc directory. And to navigate to the configuration files of Nginx, we use the following path, like the root directory, etc, which is the subdirectory of root, okay, then Nginx, alright, which is installed under etc. And for instance, I want to move towards the sites available directory, which is a default directory of Nginx, then I will use the full path as sites available. So that's how we move around in Linux directories. But every time you notice that we have used this main root directory to move towards the other directories. So without this directory, you cannot go to the other folders in a Linux file system. So that hierarchy is defined by file system hierarchy standard. And the good news is that it is almost common in every Linux distribution, whether it is Debian or Ubuntu or Red Hat Linux or Cloud Linux, that directory structure is the same. So as a beginner and as a DevOps engineer, you must know the Linux file system and Linux directories. For instance, you install Nginx where it is installed in a Linux file system, and how you can work with Nginx configuration. So it's obvious that you must know this path to open the configuration files of Nginx web server. Don't worry guys, we will take a quick look on all these directories on our VM in our practical session. One thing that I forgot to tell you, that Linux is case sensitive. For instance, if I use caps lock, I would not be able to enter and I will get errors or permission denied or the directory does not exist. So remember that all the directories and files in Linux are case sensitive. So it should be etc with small caps. The second important part of Linux file system is how we store the data on our Linux server. The common data storage formats are ext3 and ext4. They are a bit different, and ext stands for extended file system. So this is the version 3 and you can say this is version 4. Now in the current operating systems and Linux distribution, ext4 is used. So as a beginner, you just know that these are the data storage formats and these are just file system types to store data on your Linux operating system. EXT stands for extended file system, and 3 means that third extended file system, fourth extended file system. Now most of the systems use this file system type to manage the data storage on Linux servers. And there are a couple of other file system types like JFS, NFS, network file system, Btrfs. So these are just different types of the file systems. There are more than 10 types of Linux file systems. So as a beginner, you don't need to understand all of them. You just know what is extended file system and what is extended file system the version 4. These file systems are used to manage the data storage on a Linux server. That's what you should know as a beginner. So guys, for efficient disk management, we create partitions on a Linux system. Those partitions are just logical volumes on a Linux server. So your main disk is divided into one or more logical volumes. Just like in Windows, you have seen that the partitions are like C, D, E. These are just partitions of Windows system. And just like that, in a Linux system, the partitions look like dev, SDA1, SDA2. And we can even create our own customized partitions. Like for instance, I want to create a separate partition of my home directory, the separate partition of my var directory. I can create separate partitions or logical volumes for these. So that's how the logical volumes or partitions look like in a Linux operating system. And there is a command which helps us to see the partitions on a Linux server, which is fdisk -l. It shows the logical volumes of the disk, and we will use this command to see the partitions on a Linux system. Alright guys, I hope now you have the idea of a Linux file system, the directory structure of a Linux system, the partitions and the types of Linux file system. Now we will log in to our Linux VM to see these directories and logical volumes on our Linux VM. Alright guys, let me connect with my VM so that we can see the Linux file structure. I will use putty, and this is my VM. So I will connect with my user DevOps Molvi, and I will be connected with my SSH keys. You can see the settings are saved. So I would recommend that you should save the settings so you don't have to put your keys or password. So it makes life easy. Now you can see that I am in my VM. So pwd is the command to know where are you at the moment. So I am in home DevOps Molvi directory. Pwd stands for present working directory. So this is my actually present, because I am logged in with DevOps Molvi user. So a home directory of DevOps Molvi was created in home. So /home is actually where all the users have their home directories created. Like in web hosting companies, there are thousands of users created for the customers. So each user has its separate home directory, and that home directory is created in /home, /home. So /home is actually for the users directories. If I create a new user like ABC, a new user, then its home directory would be created in /home. So /home is actually meant for user home directories. Now let me log in via the root user. I will log in via root. Now I am in the root user. Now I will run the pwd command, and it says that you are in root directory, that is /root. So this is actually our file system. Like I said, /. So cd stands for change directory. I have navigated myself to the file system where I will see all the directories you can see here, like bin, boot, cd-rom, dev, etc, etc, home. You can see all these directories are owned by the root user and the root group. So that's why I entered via the root user. So whenever you install any operating system, Linux operating system like Ubuntu or Debian or Cloud Linux, you will find these directories in your root directory, I mean home. So whenever you install any operating system, Linux operating system like Ubuntu or Debian or Cloud Linux, you will find all these directories in almost every Linux distribution. So each directory has a different purpose. Like bin is used for command binaries. It has the command binaries. Let us see what's in it. cd slash bin. I can use slash bin /bin and ls minus l. Now you can see that all the command binaries are there in the binary or bin directory. These are all binaries required to run different command. Like this command ps process show. Let me run it. Process show. It is showing me that I have currently three processes like sudo, bash and ps itself. So process show is the command to show the process IDs. So if I run it from bin, I would get the same output like slash bin. Let me go to, now I will run it from the root directory using the full path slash bin ps, and you can see that I am getting the same output. And now what's the difference between these two commands? ps, I can run it from anywhere. The commands or the binaries in slash bin, we can run them from anywhere, and we can use the full path to run that command. This binary slash bin contains the system binaries and system commands in executable format. Now, for instance, if we take any other command like sudo, I have used this as well, and sync ssh, you can see. So these are all binaries in slash bin folder or slash bin directory. rsync, very common command to copy data from remote servers. So these binaries are important, and these are used to run different commands on a Linux server. Like this ns lookup, like I will use ns lookup on, these are some common commands that I'm exploring google.com. You can see that I have got the address of google.com and ns lookup name server lookup. So this is a proper utility and it is a command. So I can run it like bin ns lookup google.com. I will get the same result. So the binary slash bin contains the binary or the commands executables, and this is one of the most important directories in a Linux server. Now we can see that in file system, this is our parent directory, or the super, I can say, the directory or file system. The boot is the directory where all the files related to booting the operating system are located. The boot directory contains the important files that are required to boot any server. cd boot. Since I'm already in my file system, so I don't have to use For instance, let me repeat it again. cd, now I am at root. I will use the file system first and then boot. But there is another alternate. If I am at file system, then I don't have to use this forward slash again to enter into boot. ls-l, now you can see that it contains grub, which is important directory when we are talk about booting our system. Grub, and there must be grub.config. So whenever there are any issues related to system boot, these configuration or grub.cfg is checked, whether what's the issue with the system booting. So I can see what is in grub.cfg. Do not edit this file, it is automatically generated by grub mkconfig using templates. So we don't have to edit this file, and if we do it, we can break our operating system. So you must know about cd-rom. It is for mounting cds or external disks. So we have device dev, which is for system devices. You can see there are a lot of devices in which we use most of the time cd dev null. These are just system devices. In order to simply understand, these are just system drivers. One of the most important directories in Linux is etc, which is the home to the configuration files of all the softwares that we install or the applications that we install on our Linux server. cd etc, and it contains all important configuration files, and any software that we install, the configuration files are pasted or copied in the etc. It stands for etc, but you can see that it contains important configuration files like host and sudoers and grub, etc. In home, I have already told you that it contains the user home directories. Like you can see, DevOps Molvi has its own directory. Now if we go to other directories, we can see these are just libraries, system libraries with different architectures like 32-bit, 64-bit. These are just shared library modules. cd lib, I can see a couple of libraries and modules. Media, if we have any external media connected with operating system, it is in available in the media. And if we want to mount any folder or directory or disk, and if we want to mount any external USB or hard disk drive, it is mounted in the mount directory. Lost plus found, and not much used, so you don't have to worry about it. And then opt, this contains any additional softwares or files. In opt directory contains some add-ons, any additional software packages. So it contains some random folders and configuration files related to the kernel. The prog directory is normally considered as our virtual Linux file system. So there are a lot of files like I use most of the time to see the CPU info, like cat prog CPU info, and it will tell us details about our CPU. Similarly, we can use the cat prog mem info, and it will tell us the memory info. So this run directory is used for runtime data. Like we can see what is in it. There are a couple of folders and files. You can see the process ID of, because I am using SSHD, so this is the process ID we can which contains the processes information in real time. What is the process ID of SSH in runtime? So I can see it is 821, and I can confirm it from one of the most used command. We will discuss this command later. Grep SSH. So you can see that this is the same process ID that is saved in ssh.pid file in /run directory. So it contains the real-time data of the services, real-time process IDs of the services. Now, sbin is for system binaries. The served directory contains the site-specific data, and snap is a package manager for temporary files and directories. The USR, it stands for Unix System Resources, and var contains the log files and those files that are continuously updated. So we can see var, and there are libs and log file, log. Most of the time you interact with log files, and these log files are located in var log. As you can see that these are VMware logs, and similarly dpackage log, dmessage for server logs, and auth log, etc. And for security, there are secure logs. So all these log files are available in var log. So these are normally the important directories, and most of the times we interact with var, user, and root, etc, home. These are normally the most used directories in a Linux operating system. So I hope now you have a general idea of all these directories in a Linux operating system and what they are used for. I would recommend that you should log in to your Linux VM and see all these directories and explore the files and folders. So when we are going to install something on our Linux server, we are going to interact with most of these directories. So once again, I hope now you have a clear picture of Linux file system and the Linux directories. I would recommend that you should log into your VM and explore each directory on your server, on your VM. Until then, I will see you in the next video with Linux commands. We are going to learn the Linux commands in our upcoming lectures. So stay tuned and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more Linux videos. I will see you in the next video.